Today you are going to listen to Dr. Shashi Tharoor, who can be called as the Dictionary of English Language. In this video, you can listen to Dr. Shashi Tharoor's engaging conversation at IIMUN Baroda. This has covered a wide range of topics, including the importance of lifelong learning, resilience in the face of setbacks, his love for words and the English language, his perspective on India's evolving global image, and the impact of AI. He emphasized the importance of self-discovery, embracing diversity, and the power of continuous learning, drawing from personal anecdotes and his extensive experiences in politics, diplomacy, and literature. He also offered insights into his writing process, particularly his inspiration from the Mahabharata.
This is such a dream come true for the charming gentleman who I've had the great pleasure and honor to meet twice before. Sir, what a pleasure to be sharing the stage with you.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you. And this, you, me, and 25,000 people.
Oh
That's
my
amazing.
God. Please take a seat, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Tharoor, firstly, to get that doctor and to have studied that much. There are a lot of students here, and I'm sure they'll want to take inspiration from you. But sometimes in life, we think, does education really matter in terms of making that impact in your life and having that kind of progression that one really looks forward to, unless you're a skilled doctor or another life-saving profession. If I may ask, my first question to you is, how much did the education aid in your life journey?
Well, education is important, but I would say it didn't end with my PhD. Whatever earned me the title of doctor was the PhD, and that PhD in the end was merely a kind of discipline. How do you research vast amounts of material? How do you organize them in a coherent way? How do you develop an argument that reflects your understanding of the material? How do you write it up and present it? That's essentially what writing a doctoral thesis is all about. And that I did, and I did it very young, and I'm proud of the record I have for having done that. But that was it. Would it make a difference in my life if I didn't have those 3 letters PhD after my name? If you called me Mr. instead of Doctor, of course it wouldn't make any difference. But I would say to everyone, education doesn't stop with a formal degree. I feel I've been learning every day all my life, and I hope that I will continue learning till my last day on this planet. And as long as you have that open attitude towards acquiring new knowledge, new words, new ideas, new insights, it seems to me that you will always be an educated person. It doesn't matter if it's formal, if there are letters after your name, but keep learning.
When was that first tryst of yours, since we're a huge audience of students here, when you realized that it's about how you pick out those learnings from your everyday life? So that one incident, Dr. Tharoor, that you can share with us, which made you realize it's beyond the books, it's beyond everything, and that one life lesson, the first one that was the biggest one for you that changed you forever.
Oh, it happens all the time. I mean, in fact, when I was a kid, I was born in London. My parents moved to India when I was 2.5, and I promptly developed extremely severe asthma. And it was at a time when there was no nebulizer, bronchodilator, even inhaler. Basically, the doctors would give you those very strong pills. Your heart would go thud, thud, thud like a drum. And there you are, this tiny tot, in my case, big round eyes, unable to sleep, barely able to breathe, couldn't even lie down because then you'd suffocate on your own inability to breathe. So what essentially happened was that I read as a way of escaping from my condition. And I read indiscriminately. I was the eldest child in my family. I didn't have elder brothers and sisters whose books I could borrow. I even read things that my parents had on their shelves, probably well before I could properly understand them. But books became my escape, my education, and my entertainment. And remember that in those days, there's no TV in the Bombay that I was growing up in. There was no Nintendo or PlayStation or mobile phones or laptops. Books were it. And so I realized that I could really learn even when I wasn't well enough to be in a classroom. You can always learn from whatever you have to hand. And then in life, you constantly come across moments and experience. I remember, for example, as a young man, I was heading the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in Singapore, at the peak of the Vietnamese boat people crisis. You had these Vietnamese families fleeing communist rule in tiny little boats, often in bad shape. And if they were rescued on the high seas by ships that were coming to call on the port of Singapore, my office would have to arrange their disembarkation, look after them in a camp, try and resettle them abroad. That was the kind of thing. And I think I probably learned more just dealing with those problems, finding creative solutions, imaginative solutions to the kinds of challenges I was facing every day. Learning on the job, quite literally, is something you do far more than you can ever do out of a textbok. And I was in my mid-20s, so we had to conceal my age because I was very young for the responsibilities I was exercising. But it was an incredibly learning experience.
What were the learnings? That's exactly where I want to get to. So if there was a book that you read as a kid and then you said, oh, I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life. Or these refugees, if there's one thought that came to your mind when you were watching them, what were those learnings?
Oh, there's so many kinds of learning. Yeah. So when it comes from books you've read and so on, yes. I mean, there are things that move you, that impress you, that strike you. And the Mahabharata is a great example of something that really struck me when I was young, and which then became the inspiration for my first novel. The Great Indian Novel is an attempt to retell the Mahabharata, Maha being great, Bharat being India, so the Mahabharata is a great Indian novel. And in a satirical way as a story of 20th century India rather than of the ancient past. So there you had a story that was transmuted in my mind into something totally different. Because, you know, the Mahabharata was told and retold for 800 years, from roughly 400 BC to 400 AD. By people, and people memorized the stories, and they kept adding to it, and there were various versions and so on. But then we stopped retelling it. So 1,600 years later, I asked myself, why did we stop retelling it? What would happen if suddenly today Ved Vyas were to retell the Mahabharata? So I invented a Ved Vyas who's this old, cantankerous old politician in his dotage and in his anecdotage, who is dictating his memoirs of the freedom struggle to a South Indian secretary called Ganapati, who has a big nose, of course, but he comes into Ved Vyas dragging his enormous trunk behind him. So such are the secular uses of Indian divinity. And in the process, I tell this satirical story of the whole of 20th century India using characters, episodes, digressions, philosophies, everything from the Mahabharata in that story. Now, is that a learning? Is that a teaching? Is that a reinvention? Whatever, call it what you like. But what gives me great satisfaction is that young people who weren't born when the book was first published are coming to me clutching copies of it for signature. The book was published way back in 1989. And I'm delighted to see that a younger generation is still reading it. That's what's satisfying.
Who was the most interesting character in the Mahabharata to you, and what did you learn from him or her?
Oh, all the characters are interesting. It's one of the most amazing things about the Mahabharata is precisely that the characters are really human beings with flesh and blood and feet of clay and jealousies and passions and anger and resentment, and no one is perfect. Even Yudhishthir connives in a deception. No one is an idea, but no one is all good and no one is all bad. And that's something that's also an insight you learn about humanity. One thing I've learned in the world, in the life I've led, the places I've been, the people I've met, is that indeed no one is perfect, not even the great people you come across whom you often only see on television. But at the same time, no one is utterly without redeeming human qualities either. I just don't see people as all bad or all good. I see some of their qualities, and what's amazing is, when I was in the UN, at one stage of my career, I was I don't call myself the right hand of Kofi Annan, but I was the right finger of Kofi Annan, one of his many fingers on his right hand. And in that capacity, I met a lot of top world leaders by his side. Often it was just Kofi and me, and a world leader and his aide. And it would be a very small discussion, so you could see them, their humanity, sit them face to face, rub knees against Tony Blair in the tiny sitting room of Downing Street, or watch Yeltsin down vodka after vodka over lunch in the Kremlin, and so on and so forth. And it was fascinating to see that these people who you always assume are larger than life because you're seeing them on television are actually just regular folks like you and me. They happen to be in a particular position that gives them that importance. But basically, they aren't any different from any of us. And that was, again, a very useful learning. When I came into politics, I came in without too many illusions about all these larger-than-life characters I was going to be interacting with.
But being a diplomat, being a leader, being an author, and you've played all of these roles, what is the one character trait that actually gets you through in life that you hold in high importance? If there is a hierarchy, 1, 2, 3, what are those traits? That's what we want to impart here today.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to the young people listening, and I'm not sure everyone is listening, but those who are listening, that perhaps the most important thing is what you can call resilience. That is, everyone will know setbacks in life. Everyone will fall. I don't think there's any great successful person you've seen and admire who has never had a failure in his life. There'll be some setback, some problem, but it's how you learn from that. When you fall, you pick yourself up and you keep going on. That is resilience, and that's the most important quality that any human being can have.
And don't let your failures put you down. That's what it is.
Absolutely. But, you know, I often say to young people, first of all, know yourself. Everybody has some ability, some strength. It may not be what people conventionally value.
Yeah.
You may not be the best athlete to win the 100-meter race. You may not be the smartest student to come first in maths class. You may not be the best speaker, the best actor, the best dancer, whatever.
Yeah.
But you may be the person that people like to turn to when they're in distress, because you will often offer a shoulder and a hug and a word of consolation. You may be the person who makes people laugh. You may just have a great talent for being a good human being. It doesn't matter. Whatever your talent is, you have a talent. And don't ever let anyone let you feel that you don't have that talent. Find out what your talent is. At least when you're young, keep trying things that you feel you might be good at and find out for yourself. Fail a couple of times, keep trying, and if you keep on failing, maybe you'll tell yourself, this isn't for me, I really can't do this. But there may be something else that you can do.
Yeah.
And once you know that, the simple message to all of you is, be the best you that you can be. Nobody else can be you. So if you've got some sense of who you are, if you can be anchored in yourself, and then be the best version of that, then no one can ever accuse you of letting yourself down or letting the world down. And to my mind, that is the most important lesson. I think Swami Chinmayananda famously said, it is not what's behind you or ahead of you that matters. What matters is what's within you. And that's what you need to identify and be centered in.
Dr. Tharoor, I find it very interesting how you romance, even though you're such a charming man, and I often wonder how many women got lost in those wonderful eyes of yours. But honestly, your romance for words, everybody, do we agree his romance for words is the wowest thing ever? Please make some noise. So you got to tell us.
So some are listening.
Yes, there are quite a few. There are quite a few. As a wordsmith, and in your last book, you actually said that you credit this to your father who made you fall in love with words. I have to ask you, do you firstly play Wordle? Do you play Wordle?
I do play Wordle every single day.
Really?
And I report my score to my family.
I want to be on that list now as well because I am addicted. Obviously, we're nowhere close to you. But you have to tell us, like how you mentioned in your book, what is this romance and how did it spark off? And what is that first word that made you fall in love with it? Saying, oh, I like using this one.
No, I like using all sorts of words. In fact, as you'll see in the book, I really am obsessed and besotted with words. And I think it's partially because ultimately, words are magic. I mean, they give you an opportunity to communicate. They give you an opportunity to understand. They give you an opportunity to formulate your thoughts. They give you an opportunity to reach out to strangers and past and through the limitations of other kinds of things. But of course, you have to have a language in common to really enjoy them. And that's the other challenge. But enjoying words to me is wonderful because just as the way we breathe, the way we talk is simply natural to us, so also the words we use should be just as natural. It should be something that comes, and if it's English, so let it be. If it's the Queen's English, or now the King's, and the British have a king now, or if it's going to be some sort of bastardized version of the language with bits of American and bits of English and bits of God knows what else, and some Hindi thrown in, or Gujarati, whatever. There's no harm in that. It has just got to be you, and it's got to be the way in which you like to relate to other people.
So for you, when snack becomes snake, it doesn't really matter. And I have to ask you that when you
Well,
hear...
it can matter if you're telling people you'd like to eat a snake. That will cause some complications.
But you know, in our country, it's very sad to say, if I may say so, if you're not speaking English up to the mark of the person you're in conversation with, you may not be respected as much as probably the others. And this is something recently a very, very famous actor spoke of as well. That somehow if you're English speaking, there is this welcome to my club, an untold openness towards that person and a respect towards that person. Do you think that still exists?
Less so, I think. And you know, certainly, I think it's fair to point out, putting all politics aside, that the Prime Minister has made it very clear that he's much more comfortable speaking in Hindi than he's speaking in English. And very often, even when he meets world leaders, he will speak through an interpreter. But there's nothing wrong with that. Other country leaders do that. The Chinese do that all the time. The Japanese do that very often. Why shouldn't an Indian? Well, so far, because every Indian Prime Minister up to then had preferred to speak in English, but Narendra Modi prefers to speak in Hindi. Nothing wrong in that. And I would say that there are chief ministers in our country today who are much more comfortable in their own mother tongues than they are in either English or Hindi. What's wrong with that? I mean, the truth is we have to understand the value of a language is in its authenticity, in how real it is to what you're saying. But yes, you have to communicate to somebody who doesn't know your language. You have to go through an interpreter. By the time half these kids here grow up, there's going to be software programs on their phones, their AI-enabled phones, and let's translate it for them even as they speak.
Are you okay when people say, this is my real brother, my good name is... What are the few things that really peeve you off, if so, if there are any?
No, I don't think good name is bad English. It's just Indian English, because in many Indian languages, I mean, for example, in Bangla, they say, Aapka, apnar bhalo naam ki. Bhalo naam is literally good name. So, you know, it's because the assumption is that everyone has a nickname. Everyone is, you know, Tutul or Pinky or Lucky or whatever, but that they actually have a formal name that you need to know. And so that's what's your good name? And that's fine. Now, that's Indian, and that's part of it. Similarly, there are words in English that have fallen out of use in English, but which are still very currently used here. In England, no one says thrice for 3 times. They say 3 times. We still say thrice. Okay? No one says furlong for 1/8 of a mile. We'll still say, oh, that place is about a furlong down the road. So that's fine, because the language, for example, the Americans say fall, which was the word used in English for autumn around the 16th century, when many of the Americans took the English language to America. They continued using fall. The English stopped using it. They started saying autumn. But that doesn't mean fall is wrong. Fall happens to be American usage. So there's nothing wrong with all that. What I think is wrong, however, is when you misuse the language in a way that actually doesn't make sense. So, for example, we have this habit in India of using until when we actually mean as long as. I cannot tell you, Archana, I'll miss you until you're away. No, I'll miss you until you come back. You see the difference? But the point is, many Indians make that mistake. That's bad English. So you need to, you can have your Indianisms, you can have your Indian expressions, but you must at least use the right words when you're trying to communicate something in English.
I remember Priyanka Chopra Jonas once telling me that, Archana, the reasons I went to America and ensured that I was in every channel doing all the talks is because people think Indians don't know how to speak this good English. And then she goes, you know, I had to tell them, no, we speak very good English. And this is a misnomer everywhere in the world. They think Indians don't know their English.
Well, I mean, the truth is we can't generalize about Indians anyway, as you know. There are so many of us. There are Indians who speak good English, there are Indians who don't, but it doesn't matter. They must speak their own mother tongue better. Let them do that.
Is there a perception of India that you've seen change over the years and you're very proud of today? You've lived abroad, you've been there, you've represented us. What is the one change that you're very proud of today?
Well, I think, you know, what's happened is that our diaspora has gone abroad and completely changed the impact. When I first went to the US, as a graduate student back in 1975, which is now almost 50 years ago, I can tell you that people thought we were a land of beggars and begging bowls and poor people and maybe fakirs and lying on beds of nails and snake charmers.
And the elephants,
and
let's not forget.
occasionally Maharajas on caparisoned elephants, yeah. But otherwise, there was no real appreciation of who we are as a people. Today, that's all changed. Today, I actually have recounted the experience of being intercepted by an anxiously perspiring European at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, who said to me, you're Indian, can you help me fix my laptop? I mean, the assumption is that every Indian must be a computer genius or a geek, you know. There was an American television show when I was still in America about 20 years ago called ER. Have you heard of it? Emergency Room. All right. So when the first pilot came out of ER, it got panned because critics were saying, who has ever heard of an emergency room in an American hospital without an Indian doctor? So they had to go out and rewrite the script and write in a part for a character, which was played by Parminder Nagra. And that's how they created a credible ER, which went on to become the #1 show on American television. So that's how widespread the belief was that Indian doctors are indispensable in American hospitals. So that kind of Indian techies, Indian doctors, there's a certain perception of who Indians are, which has changed. And that, I think, makes all Indians proud. Now look at the number of Indians who are heading, you know, world-famous companies like Google, Microsoft, and so many other firms. It's just very impressive, and you can be proud of that.
How much of the AI term concerns you? Because, you know, the human touch, and especially because you're an author and you're somebody who is an extremely interpersonal relationship kind of person, what is the AI going to do? What is our threat?
I'm not so far worried because I don't think that AI can ever substitute for human beings. Because machines, and what is intelligence, artificial intelligence? It is essentially learned language, patterns of words, patterns of logic, and vast quantities of information. So AI can assemble information from multiple sources far faster than any human being can. Right. But AI can't have humanity. AI can't feel emotion. AI can't be irrational and explain, you know, things to you that otherwise, you know, don't make sense. AI ultimately is a tool. It can also be a lot of fun. And I know that there are many kids cheating on their homework by getting AI to write their essays. And these things will also happen. But ultimately, they will know that when they go out and look for a job, yes, ability to use AI for some things will help them in their job. But if they don't have their own brains to begin with, they're not going to get very far. So that natural intelligence is always going to be more important than artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is going to be an instrument used by natural intelligence.
So well said. A lot of the debates that we watch, we see people actually losing their minds and they're not using intelligence in their behavior and they stop behaving civil. So in the 9 p.m. bulletins, we're actually seeing seasoned parliamentarians doing crazy things. What do you have to say about our demeanor? And since you've been in international politics as well, do we need to learn a thing or two from those people?
From which people?
From the other parliamentarians around the world.
Oh, I can always learn from anybody, Archana. I can learn from anyone I meet and come across. Everyone has their own experiences, their own background, their own challenges, their own abilities to face the world, and they've overcome different things from what I have. I don't go around feeling that I'm superior to somebody else because my English is better or whatever. I feel that, you know, they've gone through different kinds of challenges, have come up in different ways, and I should learn from them what they know. And they certainly are free to learn or ignore what I know.
No, but it's about their behavior I'm talking about, not yours. And
well, look, not all behavior can be admirable. I'm not very fond of some of the behavior I see around me in Parliament. And that's simply the way I am as a human being. I'm not sitting around judging, but I do think that the kind of disruption and shouting and screaming and so on that has happened in our parliaments, with both sides. I mean, when I was in government, I saw the BJP people doing that. Yeah. Now we're in the opposition, we're doing it. And it, you know, it reminds me, I don't know whether in school you learn the golden rule, you know, do unto others what you would have them do unto you. All right. So the new golden rule of politics is, do unto others what you believe they have done unto you. Give it back to them. So that's what's happening now.
Do you ever feel there's a word that needs to enter the dictionary? Like, there are certain words maybe you've come up with. Like, I have come up with one, which is a mishran of coffee and chai. It's called Tchaikovsky. It's my own doing.
Sounds like Tchaikovsky was a Russian writer.
Yeah. Does that impress you?
That impresses me. So you want a Tchaikovsky, but how can you possibly mix the two tastes, my dear? It would be undrinkable.
You need to try it, sir.
I can't believe it.
I will serve it to you. But is there any word that you've come up with and you think, oh, there's a word that needs to get there?
You know, I just thought that one thing I was thinking of, what somebody was asking me was about soulmate. You know, somebody who you feel when you meet them, there is an instinctive connection that goes beyond just friendship or attraction or anything else, that your souls recognize each other from somewhere, kind of thing. And for that, there isn't really a word. Soulmate is the closest word, but it's not quite there. So I was thinking, somebody told me there's a Gaelic term that's amazing. Well, I don't know the Gaelic term, so I won't say it. But I thought, you know, since English has a habit of borrowing words from every language, why not borrow from both Sanskrit and French and create Atma-mi? Atma from the soul, and Ami is French for friend. So a soul friend is Atma-mi. There's a word that should be in the dictionary.
Oh, I love it. Have you last looked into the dictionary since your vocabulary
It's
is
not
so
in the dictionary, I promise you. I just made it up.
Did you ever look into the dictionary the last time, and which word was it for?
Oh, you know, I must admit that I don't do that too often, simply because I read so much that, you know, when you come across the same word in 3 different books, in 3 different contexts, through 3 different authors, you not only understand the meaning, you'll understand the usage, the nuance very quickly. So that's why, you know, I've just urged, whenever people tell me, teach us a new word, I'll say, teach you an old word, read. Because reading is all you need to do. Read widely. Now, I know very many young people today seem to think that books are only for classrooms and schoolwork and at worst for homework. But no one really wants to read for pleasure. I think you're depriving yourselves of a whole world if you think that way. Because books can open up entire vistas in your mind, which honestly you would not be able to do through the other kinds of passive material that you get. And then some people try and defend themselves and say, well, I'm reading also, but I'm not reading books, I'm reading on my mobile phone. Not the same thing. Because the kind of short attention span required for snippets of information on your mobile phone is not the same for training your mind as what you can get in a book. But I remember a friend of mine telling me, oh, you know, my son is only interested in football. I told her, then get him a book on football. There are books on football. Let him read what gives him pleasure. It's not necessary that you should tell him you must read this or that. But by reading, let him realize that words can open up things for him and can give him pleasure. And then from there, he can go on to read other things.
I remember our last conversation is about building a sense of humor, which you have immensely. Does Dr. Tharoor watch people imitating him online and have a good laugh? Or do you feel like, oh, shut that off, I don't want to see this, this is rubbish?
Well, once or twice people have sent me these videos and clips. I think there's some Australian gentleman who tries to teach people how to talk like me. Yeah, this is on Instagram or something, and people have sent me clips of this. I laugh it off because at the end of the day, you know, I'm me, and nobody else needs to be me. They can be themselves, and just be a good version of themselves. So I'm not quite sure that
But
that's...
it's almost like mind your language. You have an entire bunch of people creating an industry out of you. And isn't imitation a great form of flattery?
I suppose it is, actually. But, you know, at the same time, you don't want to be stereotyped as just that. So, I often tell people, thank you for saying all these kind things about my words, my vocabulary, but I'd rather you said interesting things about the content of which I'm using. The words are a means to convey thought. It's the thoughts I want you to hear, not the words.
There was one video where
not the words alone.
You moved us immensely by talking greatly of our nation. I think a lot of us here want to be proud Indians, और बहुत सारी चीजें हम अपने देश के बारे में नहीं जानते हैं. The amount you've read, Dr. Tharoor, I'd like you to leave us with 3 thoughts for our nation that we need to carry, to hold our heads high, and be proud of the nation we belong to.
Well, one definitely, I think, is the extraordinary diversity of our nation.
Yeah.
You know, we are home to practically every religion known to mankind, with the possible exception of Shintoism. We should be proud of it. I don't understand the people who want to narrow everything down to one religion. Even the religion of which I am a proud member, my Hindu faith, acknowledges so many different ways of worship. We have 330 million, 33 crore names of God, attributes of the divine. We have so many ways of worship, so many forms in which we imagine the gods. We are made for diversity and for acceptance of diversity. So to my mind, the first and most important attribute for us as a nation to be proud of is how we are so diverse and how we can all live together and dream the same dreams together. The second thing I would like to be proud of is our democracy. I'm not always proud of it. Sometimes there are moments you really wonder what's going wrong with it. But the fact that we are managing 1.4 billion people, 140 crore people, through a democratic means, not through the whip, not through force, not through what Dr. Ambedkar called the constable policing us, but simply by giving everybody the right to fulfill their own potential, fulfill their own dreams, vote for their own destiny. That's something to be really proud of, is indeed our democracy. A third thing I'm proud of is our young people, because they have in many ways brought a new energy, a new sense of purpose, and a new sense of aspiration to the future. I mean, I certainly grew up in a very different India from the India of today. Partially, of course, the liberalization of 1991 has opened up so many more spaces. There are more subjects the kids can study today than they were when I was in school or college. There are more goods and products and services you can buy and do.
I guess they're referring to Parul University that gives them so much opportunity.
There you are, more opportunities too. Is that approval or disapproval?
But what about the brain drain? A lot of us feel like opportunities are better abroad and not in our country. Do you feel that there is something that we need to look at, why we should stay back and do our country good, you know?
You know, the thing is that there are more and more people going abroad. And I've just written a column, in fact, about the surprising number of Indian immigrants who are illegally going to countries like the US. Legal immigrants going as students, staying on, that is not news. That we've seen for a long time. Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai and Ajay Banga and all these people went that way. But there seem to be also a large number of people who are just going illegally, the so-called donkey route, going through various countries, sneaking into America, trying to work there illegally, staying on. That's very saddening. First of all, that they would even feel the need to do that, as if they can't make a decent life in this country. Secondly, the fact that they would do it in such a way that they actually expose themselves to the kinds of risks and dangers and even loss of life. There's a family from Gujarat that froze to death trying to cross the icy border from Canada into America. Now, this kind of thing is very saddening to me. So yes, since you asked the question, let me say, I do see nothing wrong in going abroad legally to study, to improve yourself, and then I would like them to come back and to actually make a life here.
I don't know who's come, but someone needs to inform us what's going on. I'm going to do a quick rapid fire. Mr. Tharoor, would you indulge me, please?
Sure.
What's your favorite English word that's nearly impossible to translate into any other language?
A favorite English word that's impossible
Yeah.
to translate? Ooh. I don't know that there are that many. In fact, there are many. The thing about English is that it absorbs words from so many languages that actually there are words from other languages that you can't translate in English and
borrowed.
English simply steals. I mean, there's, for example, a word for taking a malicious pleasure in the misfortunes of others. And there is a word in English called epicaricacy, but no one uses it. Instead, everyone uses a German word, Schadenfreude, which means the same thing. So if you see somebody suffering a misfortune, having really bad news, you know, getting out for zero when he's been walking around like an arrogant fellow, then you experience Schadenfreude. There's an English word, but it's actually a German word they've stolen. And similarly, they stole the word loot from us. I've often said that the English took the word loot into their dictionaries and their habits.
One phrase in Malayalam that perfectly captures something English can't.
Something in?
Malayalam.
No, but that perfectly captures something in?
Something that English can't capture.
Oh, I'll tell you one very, very good example is, when you, for example, if there are 10 cars in a row,
Yeah.
and I want to ask you which one is your car,
Yeah.
and you tell me it's, I have to ask you this, I would have to say, in that row of cars, which number is your car? It's too long. In Malayalam, there's one simple word, etramate, which means which number. So, etramate karana ningal, etramate vendiyana ningal. That's all I need to ask you, and we will tell you. Now, that's something that English does not have an equivalent for.
Describe your philosophy in exactly 5 syllables. Is there a philosophy that you can tell us of yours?
Be true to yourself.
Oh, nice.
Be true to yourself.
Oh
5
my
syllables.
God, that was fantastic. What's your most overused word when debating or when having a conversation?
I've been too fond, perhaps, of the word defenestrate, which literally means throw out of the window. So when you reject something, when you don't like something, when you feel something is hopeless, you defenestrate it. And I even said, I'm campaigning to defenestrate this government, but that no one fully gets the.
Which Indian language sounds very poetic to you?
I think Bangla sounds very poetic.
Very
doesn't it?
true.
Very poetic.
Ki mishti. Hey, acha, like that. If you had to teach vocabulary to aliens, what was the first word you teach them to get by?
I love you. That would be the most useful expression.
We know we have a charmer.
That got
We
a
know we
reaction,
have a
right?
charmer. What's a word, if there is, that you feel is required to be used more often today that we probably used back in the day and we've forgotten? Somehow, when over the years you see language lose its way and you think, why don't people use this more?
That requires a little more thought. I mean, I would imagine that one of the things that people used to say in the old days was drawing a distinction of intimacy between forms like thou and you. French still has it.
Oh.
Vous is formal, tu is more intimate.
Yes.
In Hindi, there is a difference between aap, very formal, tum, and tu.
Ji.
But in English, there isn't.
Yes.
Maybe that might be interesting for English to revive.
If you could outlaw one grammar mistake, what would it be?
Well, the one I mentioned to you, and I dislike it intensely when people misuse a word like until. Why can't they get it right? As long as. Don't say until.
If you were synonymous to a word, if you were equal to a word, what would that word be?
I don't know. Various? I don't know. I'd like to think there's plenty of parts to me. So yeah, maybe various.
And in a
Multiple.
Bollywood-obsessed nation, who would you like to play Dr. Shashi Tharoor on screen?
I wouldn't. I hope there never is going to be anyone playing me on screen. But at one time I remember many, many decades ago when this movie Marches came out, this magazine that no longer exists called Sunday, they ran a picture of me with Chandrachur Singh separated at birth or something like that. So that, I subsequently, I still haven't met him face to face, but I did speak to his father once who had seen the same thing and we cracked a joke about it once on the phone.
Dr. Tharoor, I remember when, I don't read too much, but I did read Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, and it did change me for life because it said the exact message you've been saying. The answer is within you. Your riches are within you. If there's one book that you would recommend to every नौजवान जो यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, वो कौन सी किताब है?
बिल्कुल महाभारत ही है, क्योंकि महाभारत में सब कुछ है. और आप अगर महाभारत पढ़ेंगे, in fact, one time it used to be said about the Mahabharata that what is not here is not worth knowing, and what is anywhere in the world is here. Of course, that's too simplistic a claim today. The world is much more complex. But there is so much there. You can learn so much from the stories. You can learn so much from the philosophies. There are digressions there. The Bhagavad Gita, it's part of the Mahabharata. You read the Mahabharata and you get a complete library of classical India in one volume.
And if there are any kind of habits beyond reading that have grounded you and made you who you are, what is that habit?
I think listening. I think one of the things, I certainly read more than I don't listen that much to podcasts and so on. But even when I meet people and I would urge you all to meet people in the spirit of feeling that you can always learn something from them. It may be something that you don't like, But that too is a learning.
Yeah.
You meet somebody and you find, my God, I never want to be like this person, or I never want to have the attitudes that this person has expressed. That is also a learning. But be open-minded enough to have that learning when you meet anyone. So to that degree, be prepared to listen.
We find you so charming when you talk. Is there anybody you admire when they talk?
Oh my gosh, I admire lots and lots of people. How about a good RJ who knows how to speak to people?
Dr. Tharoor, you're too kind. I only want to say one thing to you, and that is that every time I've met you, I've felt heard. And every time I've met you, I've always gone off feeling very loved and a lot of warmth. And I can tell you that's a human trait nobody will forget beyond the words that you
That's so kind.
mesmerize us with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for being a great audience.
Great audience. Thank you all very much.
I'd like to get a good picture with sir.
Come. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And
so obviously, Doctor, we've got you here all the way. We want to felicitate you. Miss Anjani Raipat, please. IIMUN se stage pe aa jaye. Dr. Devanshu Patel from Parallel University.
for thought leaders, for sports people, for politicians, for ideas people, for writers, and above all for students and learners. And what I love about that is that they have created a network throughout this country and indeed throughout the world that you can be a part of. I just want to say to you all, I'm delighted to have been here for IIMUN. I'm very proud to chair their advisory board, and I want to say to you all that there are many people here who are taking leadership roles who started off as young students at IIMUN themselves. So those of you who are interested, be a part of it, and let's enjoy the fireworks. Good night.